All right. So this past weekend was the first weekend for my local yoga teacher training session, and it went really well. I'm excited about the group of new trainees that have joined the training. And I used one of the tools. I've posted it before, but haven't said a lot about it. But I recently published a couple of resources for yoga teacher training on Amazon. Very inexpensive. Most of the materials that I sell in downloadable versions, I sell in editable format. But of course on Amazon, that's a little more challenging to do. So I published a couple of resources sort of in journal format. And one of them that I recently published was a guided journaling journal topic. Well, actually in this journal, there are 100 topics that you as a trainer can use in guided journaling if you do that kind of activity in your yoga teacher training. I have always done it. I find that journaling, even if trainees aren't journalers, there's always one or two in a group who just says, you know, I'm not a journaler, but I get really good feedback on guided journaling in yoga teacher training, so I always do it. Every time we meet, right after we practice, we journal. So it's still when everybody's a little bit in their yoga bliss, and so we pull out our journals and I give them a topic to write about. I give them space in the workbook, that part of my yoga teacher training materials, to journal so they can keep everything together. And so this time I thought, well, I should use the resource that I created and just kind of see how it works. It worked and it was great. I've got a couple of little bookmarks here for the topics that I used this time. So the way I did this is the topics are broken out by, there's topics on asana or the physical practice, the business of yoga, chakras, meditation, personal practice, pranayama, teaching, yoga philosophy, yamas and niyamas. So I had groupings of topics, and then what I did was I just made note of them. So typically what's here in this space is a quote from an author or a question. If there's a quote, then it's followed by a question that relates to whatever topic we're talking about in teacher training at that time. And so that as a trainer, I can just flip to a page, find a topic, find a question, and read this off to my trainees. So what I did this time, if you can see, I used one of these on Saturday. I used some of these over here on Friday and Sunday in my topics. And so I just noted what date I used them on, what sort of larger grouping they're with, and then the topic, the specific topic. So I just read this off to the trainees and gave them a few minutes to journal about it. And now I've got all of these other topics that I can pull from throughout training. So I've got some quotes in here from Iyengar and Rumi and Thoreau, and I've got some sutras in here and yamas and niyamas. So I pulled sort of a variety of things that you can, questions, topics that you can give to your yoga teacher trainees during yoga teacher training. You don't have to go looking for something for them to journal about. And then at the back is, I know I will be adding some as well. You know, as yoga teachers, we're always doing reading and finding new resources. And so at the back of the journal are some blank pages that you can add your own quotes, that kind of thing, your own training topic. Maybe it's anatomy or maybe it's pranayama, and you can kind of use that and then write your quote question here in the space. So I'm really excited that this made it easy for me, and I knew what was in here. I've also always done guided journaling and always had really good feedback on it. So I knew it was absolutely something I was going to do. So anyway, you can get this at on Amazon, and it is Yoga Trainers Workshop. is who you can search up and you can find this. I've got some other resources on there as well. One is a journal very similar to this for sequencing classes. And then of course the guided journaling notebooks as well. So I'm really excited that that worked for me. It made it much easier to kind of pull a topic. I like to change it up a little bit. I know the trainees, it's all new to them, but I like to change up the quotes that I use every time I train. So that's helpful there. So it worked. So I did a little bit of something different this time in yoga teacher training as well. And that is, I just structured training a little differently. We're starting this time with an immersion focus. In other words, this weekend at training, it was all about the trainees' practice. So we always practice at my trainings, always at the very beginning of a session that we meet, sometimes throughout the day, and typically at the end we'll do a meditation and a little bit of restorative stretching. But instead of practicing and then jumping right into yoga teacher training topics, we sort of flipped back, and I wanted to talk about the topics, but as they related to everyone's personal practice. So we practiced, we went through a grouping of postures. For my vinyasa flow training, we went through the sun salutations, A and B, and we really figured out connecting breath and movement, and when the inhale and when the exhale. And so we went over those, spent a good chunk of Saturday afternoon going over those, and then we came back to a restorative practice, some pranayama, and some guided meditations. And so the whole afternoon, though, instead of talking about the sun salutations as it relates to verbiage and sequencing and those types of more teacher-focused emphasis, teacher-focused questions and review, we focused specifically on everybody in classes' practice of them, to make sure they in their personal practice understand connection between the breath and the movement and alignment questions. You know, a lot of times people come to yoga teacher training and they have alignment questions. You know, who doesn't, right? Always kind of tweaking those alignment questions. So we talked specifically about each individual's alignment and their questions about their own practice, so that it's just sort of focused, right? Instead of smaller chunks throughout training. So if you have some questions, if you've ever run your training that way, where these first few weekends in my training this time are going to be strictly immersion and the trainees' practice and their questions about their own alignment, I think it will really help give them an even more solid foundation as we move into the next phase of yoga teacher training, which is going to be discussing more teacher topics. So anyway, I hope that was helpful to you. Go ahead, please check out the journals. I also have a course on those, and I'll post those links, of course, so that you can get them. In the course, the materials are downloadable, they're editable, so that you can add them in electronically as well if you choose to do so. So anyway, check out those resources. This is Julie Chavanaugh with Yoga Trainers Workshop, Yoga Trainers Tribe. Have a good week. Thanks.